Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I'm very excited to have a product-based episode for you today. I know a lot of you out there are crafty individuals, and the dream is to have your art or your creations somehow support you so that you don't have to work a 9 to 5 or so that you don't have to try as hard with whatever other side hustles you've got going on. So I'm excited to bring a brilliant creator and crafter and brilliant designer here on the episode with you today. So buckle in, we'll be back in just a sec.
It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur.
Awesome. So Melanie Talkington is the owner of Lace Embrace Atelier and the Antique Corset Museum, where they specialize in all things related to the corset, a controversial garment that creates much discussion and curiosity, which maybe we'll get into some of that controversy here today. But yeah, we're going to delve into the history of the corset, why it's remained popular after thousands of years, and how Melanie built a business making and sharing these beautiful work of art pieces of clothing. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so one of the questions I usually always ask is, how did you find your way into doing what you're doing now?
I always had a fascination with history and the history of clothing. I always liked antique clothing and Little House on the Prairie. And in the 70s, there's a lot of flashback. The 70s kind of tied into Victorian. It was really popular at the time. So I had a lot of access to Victorian styles and just curious about it. But I always knew that there was some piece of the garment that I never knew what the word was. And that was the corset. And it wasn't until I wasn't allowed to watch The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas with Dolly Parton that I realized that Dolly's figure isn't like everyone else's figure. She was more, had a Victorian shape to her, and asked how she got her figure. And finally I got that word corset. And then that just kind of set me on this path of curiosity, asking the women in my family, what is a corset? Did you wear one? And I just would get the weirdest answers, like, they make your waist smaller, and women just wore them in the olden days. And I'm like, but why? Well, just because they made their waist smaller. And I'm like, but we don't wear corsets today to make our waist smaller. So what is that? And that never really getting an answer, going to my mom and my grandmother and then my great grandmother, who also wore corsets, but she didn't have one to show me. And she still couldn't tell me why she wore a corset. So it was just that desire to know why women wore them.
Yeah. How do you see that
Yeah.
that wearing of a corset has sort of changed throughout history? Like, do you feel like you have more of an answer as far as why we did wear them and why we would return to wearing them now? Is it different? Has it changed?
Well, there's obviously, for me as a young child, there was a lot of curiosity, and still today, there's just so much curiosity for people in wanting to know, what is a corset? How does it feel? Because media is always telling us how uncomfortable they are, but they're so popular. They're always so popular, and they're so provocative. When you see people wearing corsets, they look amazing. They lift your bust, they take in your waist, they give you a beautiful hourglass shape. They're very empowering. They give you a comfortable body hug. They are not uncomfortable. So it's just kind of dispelling those myths. We get a lot of people who just walk by our store and they're like, what's this all about? So that's a very empowering thing to have and wear. And
I love that we see it through an empowering lens. I feel like it's possible that historically it was like a value-based thing, that you're more valuable the smaller your waist is, or that the bigger the difference between your bust and hips and your waist made you more childbearing, visibly your potential as a child bearer or good wife or whatever
yep,
would be based on looks like that. And I feel like
yeah,
with the feminism and women empowerment and all the things that we're sort of reclaiming and evolving into as a society more and more lately, that it's not necessarily having a corset and wanting to feel that sense of empowerment or to be embodied in what you feel is like the beauty of your essence or whatever doesn't have to be dictated by a male gaze by any means. And that now it's about like, how do we want to create ourselves as whatever we feel is beautiful or is radiant or is, yeah, just empowered and allowed to be sexy or allowed to be provocative or allowed to be whatever for the sake of it, not necessarily for the husband it could get us or whatever the case may have been back in the day. So yeah, I love that. I love that it's sort of a reclaiming of what beauty means and what we can step into with it. So how has it been taking that interest, that curiosity, and sort of channeling it into what's now like museum? It's an online business, it's a brick and mortar business, it's got employees. Like, I know there's some people out there who are like, how do I get from this is an interest and a curiosity and like a hobby to I'm actually doing this for a living?
So I just wanted to touch back. You were talking about people, and maybe it's sexy, but also it helps a lot of people who might be in the LGBTQ community. So it can help flatten your bust if you are transitioning. So there's a lot of ways that you can modify your body with corsets, but there's also a whole medical aspect. There's people who have scoliosis or EDS and things like that. They're just sexy back braces, but they can help somebody realize who they are more to their true potential, or who they feel like they are inside. So our tagline is embracing the goddess within. And you can use corsets for all types of things, or people who have anxiety. Having that hug of the corset helps to give them more confidence and be able to operate in society. So there's like a whole under level, and it's a very, very personal experience for everyone who tries on a corset and experiences that. So it's hard to like just put it into one thing.
Yes, love that. I think that's really important to highlight.
Yeah. And then for the business side of things, it's just like because of my passion and my curiosity in corsetry, I started collecting antique corsets because I really wanted to know why Victorian women wore corsets and what was the power of that. So it wasn't looking at the bustier that Madonna was wearing in the 80s and trying to see that. It was more the historical side of things, and seeing it, my first antique corset, and how beautiful it was, and the fact that it was only meant for very few eyes, and the corset was that beautiful, and the petticoats and the bloomers and all of the lacy bits that went with it were that beautiful. Then the dress on top was that beautiful. So it was just like being able to, I was so loved to be able to dress like that and wear that much beauty all the time. And then just have all those layers and experience that. So the antique corsets, obviously, because they are such a curious thing, people, if they find one, they'll be like, oh, I want to try it on. That's your first reaction to it. But we're so used to stretch clothing and having things move with us, and we lace everything tightly because you see in the movies they're putting the knee in the back and they're pulling on the laces as hard as possible. And that's not how they were Victorian corsets. The corset was measured. You'd measure your waist over your corset, over your clothing, and deduct 2 inches. So it was just a light, gentle support. Obviously, just like fashion today, people take everything to extremes. So some people did go more extreme with how they laced a corset. But because the fabrics are so fragile and they weren't meant for tight lacing necessarily, people can put one on today and they can destroy the corset. So kind of my goal was to buy an antique corset, take a pattern off of it, make a copy, get the money for that, buy another antique corset, save that one. So that's how the business kind of started. And now there's over 550 corsets in the collection, plus all of the other lingerie and underpinnings and bustles and gay deceivers that we use to enhance our bodies. And there's men's corsets and medical corsets and all types of things in there. So it's just like that passion that, yeah, followed with me and then kind of allowed me to grow and expand my business, I think, because my passion got other people excited, and then longtime customers kept coming back, and the business just kept growing and growing. We've had our retail store for 18 years now. We've been in business for 27 years. So yeah, it's amazing how far it's gone. And then the museum collection, we also loan things to museums. So I've done a lot of traveling exhibits all through the States. I've been to Paris, working with in the basement of the Louvre and installing exhibits and seeing other corsets in their collection. And so it's taken me on a really wild and amazing journey. And I feel like I've done it before. This is something that's a calling to me, and there's an inner knowing as far as my work goes that this is something that's just very natural for me to be in and be involved with.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things to highlight in that whole like amazing adventure of your business over the last 27 years is you got curious. You said, this interests me. I want to know more. And you went down that rabbit hole as far as you could get, and it became something. It's like we don't have to sit down and write out a whole business plan about how I'm going to go get curious about corsets, and that's going to lead to me making some, and that's going to lead to me selling them, and that's going to lead to me working in the bottom of the Louvre as I share some of my collection with the populace. Like you don't see the entire like highway that you're moving down. You only see what your headlights are showing right in front of you. And that is enough to get all the way across the adventure of your life, is by just doing the one thing that's right in front of you. And I love that you started making them because you didn't want to ruin the antique ones that you had. You were like, oh, we're going to need to recreate this so that this one can stay preserved while we get to try on and experience an exact replica of it. And that began to create your craft and master your craft and become something greater. And I know I've talked to you about this before we were recording and when we've discussed it before, but that you have people who are creating movies coming to you asking for corsets for their set design, for their costume designers. You have like hospitals and recovery places that need medical corsets for their people to recover from injuries or to heal or even to just walk around in their life. Like the places where your magic can go and infiltrate into new realms is greater than we could have ever anticipated at the beginning. And I just want to say that to anyone out there listening or watching. You have no clue what your like hobby could become if you gave it a little bit more of your attention, if you were willing to keep exploring it, that there's just no telling. There's no pre-planning it. It is opportunities and possibilities that arise when we go further down that path, when we keep exploring, when we keep asking questions about it. And I feel like your business is like such a beautiful model of that or showcase of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's hard to believe it's been 27 years
Yeah.
and just waking up, and even today yesterday and today, I've gotten some very exciting emails coming in. So yeah, you never know what's around the corner next. And it's just, yeah, if as long as you're passionate about it, I always have kind of believed that if I just keep doing what I love doing, that passion will show through and it will attract the right people to you and your business will kind of go down those paths and yeah, open up new and exciting doors. So, and now, I mean, when I started my business, there was maybe 11 corset makers. Now apparently there's 800 corset makers in the world because there's YouTube and everyone's sharing all their information. That's, and also now I'm teaching too. So that's changed my business a lot as well because I really get a lot of pleasure out of teaching and working with students and developing and sharing my knowledge because as much as I'd love to pattern all 550 corsets for people and reproduce them, I'm never going to get through that. So yeah, so just being able to and also it's fun working with students because then they can be creative and then that inspires me and makes me more creative too. So it's a very reciprocal thing, or even working with a bride, making a beautiful wedding gown. It's interesting because sometimes when I'm working with somebody and I'm designing something, especially with bridal, sometimes I'll channel things and I'm like, is there some antique lace or something? And then I'll get something and I have to make, and I've had a great aunt or somebody was very bossy channeling through me, telling me how I was supposed to make this garment for the wedding. And so then I asked the bride, I'm like, was there somebody really like a seamstress or something? And so it's interesting to see the the esoteric side of the business too that kind of develops. Or when I have 18th century corsets and stays in my collection. They're over 250 years old. And to hold a garment that's 250 years old and study that is so amazing. And then the energy from it and asking it questions and be like, what's this? And then, I'll look inside at the layers and stuff. And then I'll see in pen and ink little initials and a year written. And then I'll see another initial in another panel. It's like, why are these initials there? And so are these the initials of the women that wore it? Are they in, and I think they're actually the initials of the women that stitched them because they're all hand sewn. So it's just like finding stories in the objects by handling them, asking them questions. And that inspires me so much more too, because these garments were saved and they've been saved for 250 years and then they end up with me. And because people will say that they need to be in the part of the museum collection or somehow I find out about them. And there's that magnetic energy of drawing things back and kind of preserving it and sharing it and being inspired by it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and I love that notion of that our objects are imbued with the energy that we put into them as we live with them and as we wear them or use them. And that, of course, that's going to carry on, especially when we're energetically sensitive and attuned and asking questions about it, that there's story in there. And that's, yeah, just a really beautiful reminder to just that there's history and that there's knowledge and there's awareness and there's like narrative that goes back through time that can inform new creations and that can inspire us to explore more or to try something different or to create in a way that maybe we weren't aware we could create. And there's such a like freedom in that and also like inspiration in that if we're willing to tap into it. It's very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because
so,
there's a lot of bridal corsets were saved or evening corsets, or there's so much, and all of our fashion is so disposable. So it's like nice to be able to create slow fashion, to create pieces that have meaning, to create something that's a special and intimate to that person.
yeah.
So that's really special too.
Yeah, like an heirloom that's going to get passed down for generations now that it exists. I love that. So you mentioned bridal corsets. I imagine that's one of the like more common or normal things that people come in for. It's like I'm going to splurge and get the exact corset I want for my wedding. What are some of the other like common ways people use corsets or reasons people come in to get a custom corset made?
Like some people will just see a celebrity wearing a corset, so they'll want something similar to that, or they'll just be inspired because that celebrity was wearing that corset or that musician, and then they want to try on a corset. There's a lot of people who just have insecurities with their bodies, so they want to have a corset to help flatten their tummy, or they are just lost a lot of weight and they want to like hold the excess flesh but also show off their new body. As I had mentioned before, people going through transitions, if it's male to female, female to male, just non-binary, there's a lot of that. There's new moms, just had a baby. And then if we have it could be the bride, the bridesmaids, the mother of the bride, husbands and wives, wives and wives, husbands and husbands. It's wide and diverse.
Yeah. I would say I would most commonly see them in like Renaissance fairs and lots of Burning Man steampunk kind of style that is about the corsets and the bustiers. So there's like so many directions as far as design and style goes that it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be fancy in like a punky way too. There's so
Yep.
many different
Yep.
ways to fashion them and wear them. So what advice would you give someone who's maybe just starting out or who's started to even make sales and see their side hustle or their hobby or their interest as something that could go, like what are some things that they should keep in mind to stay on track or to go the distance or whatever you would say?
I think if you're really like entrepreneurship is difficult. I'm not like I wish I was a lot richer than I am, but be really passionate about what you're doing so that you have the energy to keep going with it and to grow your business. Being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur is really hard. So it's good to have a team around you. So if you can get business advisors and mentors and eventually grow your business so that you can have a team and then you're not just working by yourself, because that can get really discouraging and distracting. When I hired my first employee, it made me work harder. And then because I had to prep work for them, and then while they were working, then I had to be busy too. So I couldn't get distracted and work on other things. I needed to like focus on the business, which helped me grow my business a lot more by having a team of people. And then you can bounce ideas and then they're feel it like they're a part of something too. So then you can grow your business a lot better and more. And then I found whenever I'd get really discouraged, if I had a customer that wasn't so positive or something, and it would kind of just be like, oh, it's so debilitating. I put so much work into this piece and I didn't get whatever. But then something always positive would come back after that. Like it kind of balances. So it's just being really, truly passionate and really like now I'm sitting down and I'm like asking myself, who am I? What am I? Where am I wanting to take this? What are my next goals for this? And I haven't really had that type of in-depth look, I guess, in the same way, because it's always just kind of rolled along. But now it's like, oh, I'm like 50, 51 now. So it's like, what's the next plan? How does this shifting and growing? So that's where the teaching is more inspiring for me, and the slow art, like wearable art and wearable fashion, rather than just trying to like, here's the product. And just because like labor costs and all the costs are going up. And yeah, so it's just like really kind of narrowing down on my business and figuring out the next steps of like, and what's my exit strategy, what's the legacy that I want. And really it's easy to get tied up in your business, but I'm like, I love making reproductions and playing with antique corsets. So how can I get back to the root of my business, which was being able to work with the collection. So that's where I'm just trying to focus that. And it's nice as if you are passionate about it, you'll see so many different branches of things that you can do within your business and able to grow your business. But you really need to be passionate about it. And I think for anyone starting out, it would be good to like get a business mentor early on and set up the business and have budgets and not just like fly by the seat of your pants as I did. And make sure that you're setting up, although I didn't to some degree, because I like you need to set up your business so that you can grow and you can afford to hire an employee, you can afford to pay an employee, so because your prices are set at that level. So those things are really key for that. But
Yeah.
passion is number one. For sure.
Passion is definitely number one. And yeah, I just know there's so many people listening to this now who are like, okay, but how do I get to the corsets? I want to see them. I want to see about them. What's the best ways for people to follow you or reach out to you or get their hands on some of your corset magic?
So we have our website is Lace Embrace, LACEEMBRACE.com. That's also at Lace Embrace and all the social medias. And then the Antique Corset Museum is antiquecorset.com and at Antique Corset for social media. So you can find us there and inquire, see whatever we're up to. So
definitely go check them out and see what they're up to. There's such beautiful works of art. And yeah, I also just want to say, if anybody's out there, it doesn't have to be something fancy. I feel like you've highlighted that really well, but it can be something that you need support for your back and you want it to feel good to wear. And it could be that you're in transition with gender identity or what have you. And something like this would really make you feel more like yourself. It doesn't have to be a big wedding or a grand bazaar to warrant something like this in your collection. That it's okay to adorn ourselves. It's okay to feel radiant. It's okay to celebrate the human form and also, yeah, invest in things that will make you feel joyful and beautiful and radiant. So I love the power of that message. I love the way that your curiosity led to such a beautiful, deep pathway, a profession, a business, and a creation. And not only that, but you are supporting like budding creators to have a training ground to see that you can create a dream like this. Like all of your employees whether or not they're young people or your age or whatever, that they're getting to see that you get to build a dream. You get to follow your curiosity and do something that you just really love to do, and it gets to become something. And I'm hoping anybody out there who's been doubting it or wishing they had more time for it, but not making more time for it, is getting that message that you really can do it. I'm only in business myself after 10 years because I was curious and I wanted to know how something worked, and I went and figured out how it worked. And I thought maybe I could do a little bit more of that, or get curious about the next little piece of that, and then get to support other people to do the same. So that passion, that curiosity, that willingness to show up and explore something is how it becomes your income. It is how it becomes your life's work. And you're such a beautiful example of that, Melanie. I really appreciate that about you.
And I appreciate that about you because a lot of the workshops you've led and things like that are often things that I go back to, like your meditations that you do and things like that. And I'm like, okay, how can I apply this to this situation when I'm like, not so strong? And then that helps get the strength to embody that person who inspires you. Take some of their energy and carry that with you. So thanks for sharing your message and sharing your all that you do, because you really do help a lot of people as well. So
Thank you for that. And I
keep
appreciate that.
doing your passion.
Yeah, I absolutely will. Yeah. And I think that's a
Yeah.
big advocacy for mindset as well, is that it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you have a job and a side hustle, or whether you have created something that is your passion, there are going to be moments of doubt. There are going to be moments where you're not sure it's going to work, or you're not sure if you should still be doing this, or you're not sure if it's time for something dramatic to change in the business model or in you. And our willingness to lean into support, or our willingness to recenter on asking those big questions of like, who am I now? What do I care about now? What am I passionate about now? How do I want to show up for that now? That gets to change. It gets to change as often and as quickly as you want it to. But yeah, that mindset piece of, instead of quitting or instead of calling ourselves a failure, willing to get curious is, that's a dial-inable trait that I think is really useful as an entrepreneur. It's really useful as an artist. It's really useful as any kind of creator. So yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for watching my meditations and showing up to my workshops, Melanie. I always love to see your face in those settings too. Sweet.
Yeah.
So we've got the link, laceembrace.com. We'll put that in the show notes for you. Definitely go check out the Antique Corset Museum, see what sparks your curiosity about the corset world. And also, you probably know somebody who's about to get married. Send it to them. They might be waiting for the perfect opportunity to get their corset. But yeah.
Or their unusual, unique wedding gown. And
Yeah.
if you're in Vancouver, Canada, come by the shop. You can see the museum. You can try on corsets. So, yeah.
Awesome. Love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show, Melanie.
Thanks so much, Molly. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure.
And thank you, everyone out there, for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action, because you are here for a reason. We'll see you next time.